What happens when 3 accountants walk into a bar?
Understand what's on your balance sheet. One, what's on your balance sheet.
I was about to be like, what's a balance sheet?
So the balance sheet is going to tell you what your assets are, what your liabilities are, and what is your net worth.
They always say you have to take the money, get the money, apply for the money, etc. when you don't need it. So cash flow is a huge thing.
And so it's not just about having in accounting software a professional. You have to have the team.
I want to also I want to touch on this as well. So just moving on to pricing and profit margins, right? This is a big important part. Like we were laughing earlier saying oh, I have a business, but I don't know how much I make. I don't know if you're not making any money at the end of the day. You don't know your numbers. You don't know your projections. And a lot of times, I think as entrepreneurs, it's funny because I sit as an accountant by trade, very in my very early stages, but I also sit as the one who's built the businesses too, right? And has the passions and all the things. And I think what's made me so successful is that I understand the margins, and it's when you're looking at the numbers and the numbers, the decisions become very clear and easy. You don't have to worry about these financial, these emotional decisions, right? Of sometimes a firing decision is just that she's not producing and the numbers don't make sense. And I'm sorry, but business is business, right? But, I really want to add a widget to the product line. And they're but the numbers, baby, we call them treasure chest ideas and dreams, because we're we can't make it work, right? So I think we know that knowing your numbers is so important. We say that. We've said that so much, right? You got to know your numbers. I got to know my numbers. I got that. But can we talk about percentages? Maybe gross profit margins. What is a good number, right? So if I have a service-based business, let's take it down and break it down to accounting 101. Okay. Sales come in. Yep. Then you have your output, right? You have let's talk about that. And then when you arrive at your gross profit, what should that, or your cost of goods sold, what should that be? Just for anyone who could quickly do math to say am I making money?
I don't know. I think it's really hard to answer with just a blanket number. It really varies by industry and where your company is in the stage of growth. There may be times where, depending on what your plan is, you have set a strategy to reduce it for a certain period of time to get where you're trying to go. So again, I just don't think that that's necessarily something that a blanket number, because every industry, it could have significant fluctuations. But I do think that even if they don't, they're not looking at their financial statements on a daily basis or a weekly basis. We live in a time where a lot of people are creating businesses who don't have a finance or a business or that type of background, and they're very successful at what they do.
Yeah.
And so it's not that they have to live and breathe the numbers, but they have to have somebody that does.
That's right.
And can explain them, those numbers to them in a way that it makes sense, and they can make an informed decision, like you're saying, and they can come to those answers by themselves rather than everybody having to tell them you can't afford this or the service model isn't there to be able to do this right now. They have to have that team player to be able to explain to them, this is what's going on, this is where you want to get, and this is where you're at right now.
I love that, because it's all about sacrifice,
Yeah, agree. And I would add to that, understand your fixed cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's that cost you're going to spend.
What's a fixed cost?
That's the cost you're going to spend regardless of how many units you sell, how many services you sell. If you have absolutely no sales, you're still going to have that cost.
So payroll?
Payroll, exactly. Utilities. Those things you're going to pay regardless. So I think if you at least have a good understanding of what your fixed cost, that gives you the base to know, okay, I have to at least make this amount and then start talking about other things.
I love that. But okay, how much should I pay myself? Don't you think I should get paid? Should I take all the money out? Should I what? I'm sure that's a question in a strategy you're looking at with your clients all the time, right? You have I feel like you probably have some entrepreneurs who just reinvest everything. And you're honey, you got to pay yourself a little bit. Oh, that's fine. Or I do. I run it on my credit cards, right?
So it's
Yeah, I went there. Yep.
Yes.
Oh man. So I think it's one of those things where it depends on what their goals are, right? And so it comes into, there's so many questions that you ask them. How much do you want to pay in taxes? Because as a business owner, you have a lot more control over what comes out on taxes at the end of the year when you file based on how much money you've made, and you have direct control over that spending. But I also try and tell people that the end goal is not to pay no taxes. There are a lot of other benefits that come with being an upstanding taxpayer in our economy, in our world, that are way beyond just
Like
the cash
what?
in your pocket.
Like
Social
what?
Security, and access to being able to save for retirement. And so it comes along with, yes, like, how do we structure how we pay you? Do we need to look at the market and see what somebody else performing your role would be making? And then do we need to tailor that based on where your business is in its life cycle? There's just a lot of pieces of that. How much can you live on? How much can you afford to live on and be able to reinvest into the company? Do you want to hire another employee? How much can you take away from what's in your pocket to be able to do that? You want to develop a new product, put some money into R&D, research and development. How much can you afford to live on comfortably and be able to grow the business? And you'll still be satisfied that you're happy with how much you're making, because there are times where those two things will absolutely have to conflict, and you're going to want to reach another milestone, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices there to do that.
Oh, 100%. I love this because when I talk to our banker friends, they always say you have to take the money, get the money, apply for the money, et cetera, when you don't need it. So cash flow is a huge thing. So if you're looking at scaling or growing your business, you may need to keep some of that money in the account to get money. You have to have money to get money oftentimes, right? So are you navigating your clients? You're navigating those types of conversations and needs and things like that.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's very good to have a reserve in the bank, right? You want that reserve for, times where maybe business is slow, or, an emergency comes up or things like that. So having a reserve is very important. And just circling back on how much do you pay yourself? Like you said, you do need to pay yourself. I agree. But I do think it's very important that you reinvest in the business, right? So that you can continue that business growth. So I think that's important. And then you also hit on credit cards.
I did. You were like, credit cards, the worst thing ever.
It is, because, it's so easy to swipe.
Oh my gosh, because it starts out where you're like, I'm going to get this credit card and then I'm going to pay the balance in full every month.
Absolutely.
You're so good.
Yes. Exactly. And I think that's what you need to be careful of, right? Make sure that you can pay that credit card off at the end of the month, because that's not cash flow. Okay.
It's not a credit line, guys.
Exactly. So you really want to beware.
Or it's a very expensive credit line.
It is very expensive. And so think about that as your cost. As a business, you don't want to have to pay all that interest cost and all of that as well. So just be very careful as you continue to swipe your credit card and know that you can pay it at the end of the period, because that is not your salary. It's not.
That is so funny. I feel like I'm saying all the things. Like, these are all the things that I remember hearing, right? And you're like, oh yeah, this is still happening. Thanks, ladies.
Thank
Shop
you.
Talk by Now. Financial.
It's been fun.